Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We're glad you are here for another episode of Dive Cuts. It is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. I am not Sam Snelling, as you can probably tell. That's unfortunate for you in some ways, maybe good in others. I'm Matt Harris. I'm one of our three kind of data consiglieres, data miners here for Rock M Nation on the basketball side. Usually Sam is the one doing this and, being very artful. I am not. But I am at the reins tonight. But we're glad you're here live, especially because if you're watching live, it means you are subscribed to Rock M Plus, and you are in on the ground floor of this startup venture that we hope has not been too rickety. We hope you are enjoying the content and entirely too dense of a portal target thread over on the message board. This is a live feed on YouTube. Where hopefully we're going to see some questions come in at some point. If not, Watkins and I will just, have a nice discussion amongst ourselves. This will soon make its way into your feeds, probably starting tomorrow on Thursday, April 4. So we're going to hopefully try and give you some information as current as we have it on all things portal related. That's kind of been the running theme for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And tonight, who's joining me after this belabored intro, he is to my right. It is Matt Watkins, joining me from St. Louis, where hopefully his collie will not interrupt us with weather-related issues. Watkins, how are you tonight, and how soon before we start fighting about Tony Perkins?
I'm doing good. I think I think the dog's settled in. If this was 2 nights ago, we would have had a major problem.
Same here.
Tornadoes and things. So we survived. The dog had a meltdown, but she's good now. The other one does not seem to be fazed by the weather. The younger one. So
that's good.
But we're doing good here.
Mm-hmm. How are you feeling otherwise about the board at this point? I think the one thing that, as we sort of get started here, is we've sort of found a weird rhythm the first couple of weeks of, portal season, where Monday and Tuesday and maybe a little bit into Wednesday, we begin to see kind of some names filter in, and then you'd get towards the latter half of the week, there'd be NCAA tournament games or NIT games, and the pace would kind of slow. This Monday and Tuesday, it was crickets in terms of guys going into the portal. But for Missouri, there was a little bit of movement over the weekend with some guys at the top of the board. So I figured we would start by recapping that sort of movement. Sure. And I figured we would start with Mr. Tony Perkins, a Iowa guard who nearly slipped in under the radar and unbeknownst to people for a visit to Columbia this weekend. So I figured we would just start there and just sort of say, were you surprised that, Tony Perkins made a visit this early, considering that I think he only went in the portal, maybe 3 or 4 days before that? It was a little bit quick for him to take a visit. Normally there's a little bit more of a buffer before those guys begin to take a visit. So I'll just start there. Were you surprised at how quickly that visit transpired?
Yeah, to some degree. I think with a lot of guys on Mizzou's list, we'll call it, the list of people we know them to have at least reached out to or through other channels know that they're recruiting. Some of the guys, they get in quick and you just don't know. Like last year with John Tonje, he came in right away and we had no idea. I believe that was the Sweet 16 weekend, if I recall correctly. And Mizzou had just been eliminated from the tournament the week before. It's kind of funny. We had no idea he was in. We knew he was in the portal. But then I think it was Saturday night. I was just sitting around scrolling through Twitter, watching television, and I get a new follower. And I'm like, who is this? It was his mom.
Same.
So it was, that was kind of a clue, like, oh, yeah, well, maybe there's some interest here. And then on Monday, I had completely forgotten about it. And he commits, and we're like, who is this? Who could this be? And well, yeah, now putting the things together, it makes sense. And with Perkins, it was kind of the same way. He entered earlier in the week. They got him in that weekend. We had not heard anything about any visits taking place that weekend. And then I get a text, I think it was Friday night. Oh, yeah. Get someone in. We have no idea who it is.
Yeah.
That doesn't help me. As far as reporting anything, I could say, hey, some identified player is on campus.
Yeah.
if they don't know who it is, you kind of wonder, is it just one of the players that they have now? Who knows? And then it came out Saturday at some point that it was Tony Perkins, and we had been discussing offline that, here's some possibilities, and Perkins was one of the names that came up. But, you had done some sleuthing on the internet about who it couldn't be. Based on where they were. But it was a bit of a surprise, but that's known to happen every now and then. It's a somewhat expected surprise, I guess. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Conversely, Tarris Reed, a guy that I think if people listen to us or they follow, anything that we've been trying to put out for the past couple of weeks, even before portal season started, was a guy that was easy to put on the radar. Not surprised he went in. Not surprised Mizzou prioritized him. We had sort of heard that, he's still sort of like buried under a little bit of schoolwork in Ann Arbor, and, he's taking his time to sort of work through things, in his recruitment. So I think we had sort of thought, okay, if he doesn't get in, that makes sense. And then I think on Friday afternoon, I saw a tweet and I also got a text that, he's in Manhattan, Kansas for a visit. And, I don't think that really caught me by surprise. If anyone knows Tarris's background, they know he played for Mocan Elite, know he played his senior year at Link Academy. The coach for both of those teams is Rodney Perry, who is now on Jerome Tang's staff. Easy connection built in there, real familiarity built in there. I sort of expected K-State to be a team that would maybe try and get in the mixers because of those relationships and because they kind of are doing their own retooling process. But for them to get the first visit was a little bit surprising. I think kind of the sense coming out of it is that he's still on a, pretty patient timeline. But I think that at least for us, it sort of stirred some questions about, is this something where you start to, not bail, but do you prepare? And so I think that that's the first place my mind sort of went is, Amari Williams is a guy that they aren't really in on the ground floor with at this point. Sam Alexis was a guy who was asking for $500,000 or $600,000 from suitors. A lot of money for probably an overpay in that regard. Missouri wasn't getting traction there. A lot of eggs in the Reed basket. And if, he gets to, Kansas State first, do you think about expanding the board? I think, that'll be sort of worth talking about later, but I didn't know what was sort of your read on Tarris's decision to sort of take in what the little apple had first before Columbia.
So just to be clear, you're asking for my read on Reed. Yes. I would say that it was both, to me, a little surprising and, not to raise anyone's dander, perhaps a little concerning. Mizzou has, I think we all know, has known that Tarris Reed was going to enter the portal. A lot of people have known that he was going to enter the portal for some time. When you have a coach that wins 8 games and he's been there for as long as Jevon Howard has, and Jevon isn't coaching half the games, their point guard isn't playing in half the games, and it's an absolute unmitigated disaster. You can kind of see the writing on the wall. And then, of course, Howard gets fired. And then Tarris enters the portal. So, to some degree, I'm sure he has some familiarity with Mizzou. Konza Martin recruited him. I don't know how involved they were at the end as far as this is legitimate, but there was a recruitment there. He knows the school. But as far as the staff goes, this is a new staff. So when you look at getting them on campus, I think that's a big thing.
It is.
And he's been down at Mizzou for his brother's state basketball tournament. So it's not like he's unfamiliar. Is it possible that they could do a Zoom visit and get this done? Maybe, but when you have the option of coming to Mizzou for a visit and instead you go to Kansas State with your roommate, Doug McDaniel, who then commits several days later, there's some significant concern on my part about how likely this is. And from our perspective, it was kind of one of those things, like one of the big draws of Tarris Reed is we know him, and by we, Mizzou knows him.
Yeah.
Tarris Reed knows Mizzou. If this is something you can get done and get done quick, bird in hand is better than 2 in the bush, great. That's one of the appeals. But now it's not looking like that.
Yeah. And I think that's a fair point. I think what got my hackles up too is it's the same day that a guy that you and I really like, Ruben Chinleyu, kind of a developmental big. You're going to have to be a little bit impatient with him, but hyper athletic, fits all the physical parameters you would expect from kind of a big that Missouri would want. Goes in the portal, from Washington State, and that's a guy that has showed a lot of real flashes and progress down the stretch run. And do you begin to look at that and make a call there? And sort of the impression I got, when I spoke to some people, was they're still going to ride with Tarris. That's the top of the board. And so the question, I think, and again, we'll sort of get to this later in a later segment. When do you start expanding the board out a little bit here? I think the questions that we're going to start to face is, we're getting to the point where I think in the next week or so, we're going to start to expect to see kind of a rush of commitments. That's typically what's happened the last couple of years out of the first dead period during portal season, and you haven't gotten a guy on campus yet, or at least not publicly known, gotten him on campus. So that, would be concerning to me if they come out of the, dead period and there's not something in the works. Because I think at that point you have to start assessing, do we have any other options that we want to look at? Are we surprised that we haven't seen Jevon Porter here yet? I know you sort of, for our subscribers who are, the forum who are watching right now, you posted kind of a recap earlier in the week where you made it sound as if you aren't surprised that Jevon hasn't made it here yet.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that your hackles aren't nearly as up for Jevon as they are for Tarris.
I'm not, for two reasons. First, he hasn't taken any other visits that we know of. That was, to me with Tarris, that was the big thing. If no one had gotten on campus, I would probably be like, well, maybe he really is just taking his time. He's got other stuff going on. But if you've got time to visit Manhattan, you've got time to visit Columbia. So where are we at on that? But moving it back to Porter, I did a little bit of digging on that. And of course, the family has got some stuff going on.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything yay or nay about Jonte Porter, but he has been wrapped up in a prop bet allegation of improprieties and whether he may be involved in shaven points or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
For prop bets. I think those are, you really have to be a degenerate to be doing prop bets, but if you love them, more power to you.
I have friends who love them, so I'm friends with degenerates.
I mean, if you love them, more power to you. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money. But you've got that going on. And then also his older brother, I believe it's his older brother, right?
Yeah.
Jevon Porter.
Yeah.
As some of you may know, had a pretty serious legal issue in Colorado where he was involved in a accident where someone died, and he's been charged and pled guilty to a few felonies. And that sentencing, I believe, was April 19th.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, his Michael Porter Sr., the dad, former assistant coach, has been pretty wrapped up in doing that. And I think this is a kind of a jumping off point why I think there's a big draw for him to come home from their side. With Lorenzo Romar, who at least is Michael Porter Jr.'s godfather. I'm not sure about Jevon, but needless to say, a very close family friend. So with him being out, I think there's a big draw to getting him back home, and by home, Columbia.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, with him, it's not so much. If I see that he's got visits lined up coming out of the dead period 2 weeks from now where he's going to be visiting other schools, then yeah, I mean, I'll be concerned at that point about their prospects. But right now, I think with him, at least there's legitimate basis why he hasn't been on campus. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. But at least I can see it. Yeah.
And otherwise, I think, it's pretty clear that those are the three names that sit atop the board right now for them, with Jacob Cruz already in the boat. We've talked about Cruz a lot. We've talked about Porter and Reed a lot. I think the one thing that we've sort of, got to get back to a little bit here is talking about Perkins. He was a guy that, we saw some contact, and you had sort of done your vetting of him, seeing how he matched up, to certain, analytic guideposts for what Missouri might need. You thought he was a good grade out there. I think on Saturday, I was very vociferous in the Slack channel at my qualms with Tony Perkins. So I figure we should work through that here because I think it's one, it'll inform people about his game, and two, I think it's sort of just an interesting discussion about how you want to build a backcourt through the portal here. And so I'll throw it to you as someone who is probably a little bit more keen on Tony than I am. Just how would you describe his game for folks, and what do you think the allure here is for Missouri of bringing him in, or at least making a push to acquire his services?
Yeah, I think a big thing that I've been looking at with Mizzou, and 2 years ago Mizzou was great. They had a great offense, an elite offense, but their defense kind of stunk. But
kind of is generous. Very generous.
We kind of just shed that aside because their offense was so fun to watch. They outscored teams, and when they weren't going to outscore a team, they were going to get absolutely blown out. So the defense really didn't matter that much. There was no close games where you really looked at like, man, if they could just defend, they would have won that game. So it's kind of in the back of our minds, but not at the forefront. It'll get better, whatever. Fast forward to year two, got off to a little bit better start. And then I think it was about the Seton Hall game where I wrote a piece like, we got to figure out what the defense is here. Is it improved or is it just more of last year? And we found out through the remainder of the year that it was pretty much the last year. And that kind of kept percolating with me. So when I'd watch games, I really paid a lot of attention to what the defensive problems were. And it really comes down to me is that Mizzou lacked two and a half things this past year. They lacked depth, which, that's no fault of the players.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that their perimeter guys really lacked the ability to effectuate the system that they were trying to run. And by that, I mean, when you're running an up-tempo system that involves jumping passing lanes, hard hedging, throwing out traps, you need guys who are athletic, you need guys who are quick, and you need guys who are long. And Sean East had a great year, not a great defender. Nick Honor is a pretty good defender given his limitations, but when you're 5'10", and you're not the quickest guy on the court, that, if you're in the right spot, does it really matter? So when I look at how they're building the team and we look at their high school players that they're bringing in, all long athletic guys who project well at defense eventually. When you looked at the transfers they've brought in the last few years, they've not really been that. They've been more of the skill-oriented type where they may give up some athleticism in exchange for shooting or skill or whatever. So one thing that I'm been big on this year and bringing this back to Tony Perkins is he fits that mold of a bigger guard who, when he wants to, can defend well, he moves well, and he runs well in transition. And those, fitting all the pieces together on a team to do what you want to do is big to me, as opposed to having guys who have different skill sets like, well, this guy's really good, but he's a shooter, doesn't really defend much. We've got a big man who can't really move. We've got an undersized center. Building something where you can be competent at minimum, good at best on defense, and then build out from there. That's a big drawing point to me. And I think Tony Perkins is a guy who can do that.
There's no doubt, and I put a scout up on the board and put a film up. I think one thing Tony does really well is he can grab go, you can hit it to him on a quick inbounds, or he's going to be able to really jump, lazy ball reversals, moving to the second side. If you try and skip it, he's going to get it. He can definitely do, I think, a little bit of what DeMoy did, which was he can turn offense into defense very, very quick. Mm-hmm. And if you grab go, you cannot, even if a team bails on the glass, which, teams did at times against Missouri in year one, you have someone that can go get a board and push and really apply pressure to the middle gap, really force teams into scramble mode. They can't stop the ball. They can't build a wall to hold it on one side of the floor. Even if, I think Perkins has some questions about rim finishing, he's either going to get fouled or it's going to put the ball on the rim. Mm-hmm. So one of your other guys, a lot of these big athletic long dudes you've recruited, can go get it and stick it back. He can play in straight lines that way. I think the other thing that he does really, really well that I wrote about on the offensive end is I think he's fantastic as a passer who doesn't need a ball screen to create an advantage for himself. There's some clips where he's in a pick and roll, but the pass he makes is to a teammate that's either in the slot or filling behind that has not had their advantage created by that ball screen. They're just doing what you should do for good off-ball movement, and he recognizes that and just makes the play and moves the ball there. A lot, I think sometimes we think of a point guard as a guy who's got to, break a defense down, crack it. He's really good, I think, at times at just finding simple reads, simple plays, moving the ball where it needs to go, and he does it without turning the ball over a ton. Mm-hmm. That's something that I think Nick Honor got away from at times last year because the team lacked enough offensive punch that Nick had to turn those actions into scoring opportunities for himself because Missouri didn't have much else, and that's not what Nick is good at doing. So you wound up with Nick Honor doing something he's not comfortable at and taking away something that I think he really thrived at in his first year here. I think Perkins is not a one-to-one of Nick Honor in every facet, but I think in that facet he is. You don't need to, he's not a point guard in like this modern sense where you put him in ball screens or in, handoffs. He can make a play in the normal flow of a possession, which I think is absolutely vital for what this offense needs. There's facets of it that still want to be passing, cutting, and player movement based. Tony can do that. I think where you and I diverge a little bit is how is Mizzou going to classify him? Mm-hmm. As in, if he wants to be a point guard, and if he's coming here expecting to do what Sean East did, which is playing a lot of ball screens, then I think you start to rub up against some questions because Tony is good at a lot of things, but he is not very good in ball screens as a scorer. Has really struggled his 2 years of heavy minutes shooting off the bounce. I think last year he shot so poorly that it was like 0.56 points per shot. Mm-hmm. Like that, no matter how you feel about mid-range jumpers, that's a bad shot. You need to expunge those from your portfolio as quick as you can. And I think while he's physical and he can, take contact and get his shoulders past defenders, the rim finishing is hit or miss at times. He's not a guy that, off 1 foot or two is going to go up and put the ball down on a guy's head. So if you're bringing him in and the thought process is, okay, Tony, we're going to have you bring the ball up. You'll trigger some sets. We're going to have you flow through a possession. You're going to have the freedom to make reads and passes and things of that nature. Then I'm fine with it. But if the plan is to plug him in, and say, you're going to be our Sean East, we're going to put you in a bunch of, continuity Euro-style ball screens. I got questions, a lot of questions about that use. And then I think the case for him gets kind of rickety at that point. So I think that for you and I, that's where we diverge a little bit. I think you're sort of being the optimist and seeing, the defensive side and things like that, which is completely fair, completely correct. But man, I get stuck on what are they pitching him on as far as the offensive role there, because I think that's going to be kind of the linchpin for how this thing works for them moving forward. But tell me if I'm off base for thinking that.
No, I mean, I would agree. I don't think that if Tony Perkins is, excuse me, I'm just getting over a little cold this week. I don't think that he is going to be a Sean East type player. If I'm looking a little cross-eyed, I'm looking over my spreadsheet right now.
I was doing that earlier.
But things that I like about him, a free throw rate. We talked about that a couple weeks with Kylan Milton down at Pine Bluff, who has just an astronomical rate. Perkins is not that, but it's 42.4%.
Still really good.
That is what you would want out of a post player. He gets to the line, and he shoots 78.7% when he gets to the line. Rim finishing, not a big strength, but a 1.13 points per shot is solid.
That's median.
Solid.
Right?
And when you consider it's a guard and that, everyone is being measured against that, including big men, that grades out pretty well along the point guards I've looked at. But more importantly, his usage of rim shots is almost 40%. Again, that's very high. His runners are bad. His pull-up jumpers are bad. He shoots well off the catch. So, when you look at that, yes, he's not going to be a Sean East coming in and dallying around in the lane and creating his Steve Nash plays, which Sean was very good at that. But most players don't do that. When I look at Tony, if you're running a ball screen, if he has an immediate shot out of it, great. If he can get downhill and get to the rim, great. If not, instead of using those medium shots, we'll call them, Mizzou hopefully is building a roster next year that's going to shoot pretty well from outside. You've got Jacob Cruz, who's, he he has astronomical shooting numbers. I expect them to come down a little bit when he comes up a level, but he's a legitimate shooter, and he's 6'8". If you bring back a Caleb Grill, very good shooter. Bring back a Tamar Bates, very good shooter. Bring back John Tonje, very good shooter. If you place those guys around him, he doesn't need to be Sean East to score, because Mizzou had Sean East, Nick Honor, and Tamar Bates as your shooters. And, Nick was pretty good. Tamar was pretty good. Sean, when he actually took chances, was pretty good. But you had to rely on them to help create so much offense because of the offense you had to run that they weren't always spotting up. But ideally, with a Tony Perkins, you've got more capable assets around him where he doesn't need to rely on that mid-range game that he's definitely struggled with.
Yeah.
And point two, I would say, is I think Mizzou might be adding another guard as it is. So
that's the thing. And
even if they add a good point guard like Tony Perkins, if you get another combo guy who excels in pick and rolls, voila, you've hit the Trinity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where when we've tried to suss it out, there's been more clarity on two than one. Now, if you're going to bring in two guards, two ball handlers, that means somebody probably has to go.
Yes, for sure.
That means
someone will be going before they come in. But yes,
that's how it works for Mizzou. They do. It is, no matter where you go, it is hard to get real firm answers on who would be on the list, and we don't like to put guys on a list. I think that's unfair to them. But it's something that I think people have to be aware of. If they're going to take two ball handlers, they can take as many spots as they want, but I always sort of settle at 13 scholarship slots, maybe 2 NIL slots. You take 5 transfers, you're at 16 guys. Somebody inevitably will have to step out the door and look for opportunities elsewhere. We will cross that bridge when we get there, but that's just something to put a pin in right now. If they're looking at 2 guys to come in here and tandem it, means somebody's got to go. So it'll be worth tracking that as we move, maybe through the next couple weeks, and maybe not immediately because we're going to hit a dead period starting tomorrow. But I think it's something to sort of file away. With Perkins,
before we move on, I do want to add that
go ahead.
This dead period, we've mentioned it several times, runs from tomorrow through the 11th, and that simply means there can be no on-campus visits or coaches going to visit players. So recruiting can still happen via Zoom, phone calls, text, whatever. But just so you all know as listeners that's what we're referring to at the dead period. So starting Thursday, there's not going to be anyone on campus, and the coaching staff will not be visiting anyone in person.
Yep. Which also tees up this fine point. Tony Perkins today announced his top 6 programs, which that was fast for him to go from in the portal to a top 6 in a week. So Tony seems motivated. That's good. I'm happy for him. That list, unsurprisingly, included Missouri. It also included Arkansas, which...
Who's the coach?
Yeah. Muss isn't gone, but the expectation is there will be an opening. Look, I'm waiting until there's reported stuff. You go ahead and you get out in front of it. But then there are 3 schools that really are hard to kind of gauge here because we don't have insights there. We don't know people there. One of them is Oregon. The other is Ole Miss. And the final one is OU. OU has seen just a mass exodus. So I think they have 6 or 7 guys in the portal. They've got to get bodies in. There is a need for Perkins services there. It's very, very clear. I think they've lost their 2 starting guards. I think Jevon McCollum and Milos Uzan are both gone. So Porter Moser needs guards. So I have no doubt about the sincerity of his interest on that front. But the one that you and I and that we've sort of really gone back and forth privately and even on the message board about is Indiana. Tony is a Circle City native. He is from Indianapolis, played for a really, really, really good high school program here, Lawrence North. If you know of Mike Conley.
I don't like that name. I don't like it. Anything with that name in it is just bad news to me.
But it's a really well-respected program here. He was not heavily recruited by Butler, not heavily recruited by Notre Dame, not heavily recruited by Purdue, not heavily recruited by the program in Bloomington. Tony was a moderate 3-star. I think he was like number 314 in the composite coming out. Iowa saw him the summer before his junior year when he was still mostly getting MAC offers. They pounced. He blew up his senior year, stayed loyal, and has gone to Iowa City and kind of done what Fran McCaffrey does to 3-star dudes. He turns them into a death machine with only a mild interest in guarding people. But what Tony has also done in the last couple of years is absolutely take the Hoosiers to the woodshed inside Assembly Hall. He's played really well. Mike Woodson is also looking to fill 6 spots. And
that's it?
Yeah, I think that's a mild surprise that it's only 6. But
he's recruiting like there's 40.
That's my other point here is we are not an Indiana basketball recruiting podcast, but what I will tell you is if there is a guard that is top 20 on the board, they've been hearing from Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the board prioritization is in Bloomington or where Tony fits on it, but I'd say he is probably behind. This is me speculating and just reading the tea leaves. Probably behind Miles Rice, our guy.
He's not going to Indiana.
You keep saying that, but they got $4 million in NIL and a crap load of minutes to hand out. They have Kanan Carlisle, a former top 60 kid who was at Stanford, an Atlanta native, who went in the portal right after Jared Haas got fired. He is lined up for an official visit. And then comes the tranche, which is an accurate term here, of local dudes that IU may be trying to set up for homecomings. We've got Tony Perkins, aforementioned. We have Connor Hickman, a guard out of Bradley.
Good player.
We've got very good player. We've got Leland Walker, a solid player from Eastern Kentucky, and Connor Sejan from Wisconsin, another Indiana kid. And if that's not enough, Hoosier fans are so insane. They want to lure Ryan Conwell into the portal from Indiana State. That is 5 local guys on top of
Blackman from Stetson. Doesn't his brother play on the team or something?
James Blackman's little brother is a really good player at Stetson. So basically 6 to go with the 2 guys out of Atlanta they want. And if you're Tony Perkins, where do you fit in that mix? So I think Tony has not taken a visit there. All I've seen reported, and at least when I've talked to some folks here, they're moderately clued, and all they've said is he's expected to visit. There are no dates, and if there are no dates, then it's kind of the same thing I expect with Reed and Porter.
Right.
Until there are dates, it's all theoretical. He cannot visit until after April 11th, to our point about the dead period. So my question for you, kind of similar to everyone else's, what's a timeline that's reasonable for you to accommodate Tony at this point? I think going through the dead period is an obvious one. He's just coming off a visit. But how long do you go out of the dead period before, if you're Missouri, which its board at point guard is appreciably smaller than Indiana's, how long do you sort of let that process play out? And that's a hypothetical, but I figured I would ask you.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough, especially if you're looking at potentially taking 2 guards for Mizzou. You know.
You got to get to getting if you want to get the second one.
Right. I'm having that information. It's a little surprising that the board isn't bigger for the guard situation. And we try and draw lines between point guards and shooting guards, or combo guards as we like to call them. When it's speed dating time, this guy may be a little bit more combo, this guy may be a little bit more point, but if we get 2 of them and we like both of them, we don't care what the designation is, we're going to take them both.
Yeah.
So with that being said, when it comes to Perkins, I think Mizzou probably feels pretty good, and I think they should feel pretty good about where they're at. If he is going to be of the opinion that I want to take 5 visits and this is going to go into May, I think you have to start looking at alternative options.
Yeah.
Tony Perkins is a very good player. I like him. I think he'd be a great fit. But you've got other guys out there. I mean, I'm just saying Miles Rice is still available. I would be, if I were in charge, I'd be kidnapping him and bringing him to Columbia. But I am obviously not doing that because I'm A, not in charge, and B, not going to commit a felony. But theoretically
you get disbarred.
But there are very good players out there. So I anticipate more. Like we just saw Trey Donaldson come into the portal today, who has a lot of connections to the Mizzou program. I think what Mizzou needs to do is they need to recruit like they have 2 spots available there.
Yeah.
And if that means, Tony Perkins is going to take his time, well, we'll keep on him, but we're going to go sign another point guard because we need that.
Yeah.
And if Trey Donaldson, not saying him specifically, but just hypothetically, has connections, the program's been recruited by guys on Mizzou staff, played with Ant Robinson in high school. If he's like, well, yeah, I'd be very interested in coming, and if things work out, I'd commit. Great, do it. Still recruit Tony Perkins. You have the luxury, I guess, of as a way of looking at it, of taking 2. So if you're going to take 2, recruit like you're taking 2, and not just wait on Tony Perkins to then see what you're going to do next. That being said, if you're not taking 2, it gets a little bit trickier. But I mean, if they like Tony, and I think they do, and they feel good about it, you can ride it out a little bit, but you don't want to be in a position where it gets to May and you're like, well, we have no one here.
Yeah. And this is the time when I'll insert kind of this little note or nugget. This afternoon, I looked at the last 2 years, the top 50 prospects in 2023 and 2022, and just sort of when those guys entered the portal, when they committed, and sort of the number of days between. Just how long did it take? Not when did they take visits, nothing else, just from A to B, from exit to arrival. And for both years, the average was around 22 to 23 days, and the median was around 19. So basically, 2.5, 3 weeks for a portal recruitment to play out. If you were to apply that to the guys that we've talked about, Jevon Porter's, cutoff date arrived yesterday. So he is +1 over what we would expect the median, the average to be. Now, it could stretch in some cases as far as 30 days. That's not uncommon. It's usually, though, when that's happened, it's guys who are at the tippy top of the portal or they're exploring their NBA draft route stock. So they're taking time to wait to hear feedback or do workouts. If you are a traditional transfer, you are usually starting to reach a decision by that point. Jevon Porter has gone past kind of the normal window for the last 2 years. Tarris Reed, a guy we talked about, April 12th would kind of be the date we would expect a decision there. That is 1 day after the portal period, which is why we talked earlier about when do you want to start trying to see him get on campus, and why I think if you don't have something set up coming out of the dead period, you start to get a little bit worried because now you're starting to get deeper into a recruitment that honestly I think most people thought would be pretty quick and efficient if you got it done. And that'll come into play when we talk here in a minute about kind of the timeline moving forward. As for Perkins, and this is why I think it's okay to flex a little bit, his cutoff would be April 18. That's a week after the dead period ends. So he could go to IU. He could go to Oklahoma. He could follow up right after that. You would like him to not take as many visits as possible. You'd like him to feel like, oh, I saw IU. I don't feel prioritized there. I'm just going to go to Mizzou. But essentially where we are is coming out of the dead period. Within that week window, which is also a window when we see a lot of commitments take place, you want to see Reed and Perkins start to make a decision. So I think that's where we are here, is coming right out of the dead period. These 3 guys that are at the top of the board, 1 or 2 you'd like to see come off. Preferably Perkins, because you need a point guard. You want to get a ball handler in here so you can begin selling somebody else on playing with him. And probably Reed, because everything we've always heard since the fall was they wanted another big. They want another veteran big. They want another big. Porter, in terms of need and in terms of timeline, I'm willing to give a little bit more grace and flex to. But you probably want to see Reed and Perkins start to wrap things down coming out of the dead period. Which gets back to this point here, which is it's felt awfully slow this week. I think, we know they've been in contact with Miles Rice, even if that hasn't been reported publicly. We know that they have been in contact with Adu Thiero, kind of a hybrid wing out of Kentucky.
Sam's going to be jealous that you didn't get to talk about him.
He loves Adu, loves that kid. And then today it was reported, as a Proporos, Sebastian Thomas, a combo point guard out of Albany, is a guy they reported contact with. I posted about him a little bit ago on the board. In some ways has some features of Tony Perkins, but not the size or kind of the athleticism, but can make some passing reads, can play in some passing lanes, not always efficient in pick and rolls, but he's 3 inches shorter and about 20 pounds lighter.
And he's doing it in whatever conference Albany plays in. I'm not sure.
The Northeast Conference, number 21 conference in the country, on 90% minutes and nearly 30% usage. So moderate your expectations if Sebastian's the guy here. I'll just say that much. Like the board as it stands right now, I've got it 28 or 29 names. Too few, too many, just right. Your thoughts let's start there. The macro. Are there enough names up there for your liking?
I think the sheer volume is about what I would expect. I may have missed a couple if we're up to 29 or 30, but let me just take a look at
some of these have been that they haven't publicly been linked to, but maybe they vetted or they talked about.
I think my problem as far as the amount goes, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players that are classified in my hierarchy as wings.
Yep.
That is, we'll call it a solid third of the supposed contacts they've made. They're not recruiting wings. They signed a wing. They like Jacob Cruz as a wing. They brought him in as a wing. Why
are we talking to wings?
Tamar Bates if he comes back. John Tonje if he comes back. Caleb Grill if he comes back. All wings. We got wings. We are literally the Buffalo Wild Wings of the college basketball world. We don't need any more wings. We need some ranch or blue cheese, whatever you want to put on it. I don't care. But that, I think, to me is the bigger thing. It's like you see a few combo guards in there. You see a very few amount of point guards, and you see virtually no post players. And if that means Tony Perkins is prioritized, great. If that means Tarris Reed is prioritized, great. What happens if you don't get him? That's my thing about the board right now. I think the sheer amount is about what I'd expect. How it's allocated through needs might be a little light in a few places. Yeah,
I've got them at 6 combo guards. The only one that they are in play for, is that maybe they've contacted is DJ Davis. Everything else is clear. They've contacted 3 hybrid players, which isn't a pressing need, so I don't really worry. Jevon Porter's the priority there. Not worried. Would like to see maybe some more combos. Then you get to the point guards, and this is where I think you start to get into it. Tony Perkins has been here. He's a finalist. He's visited clearly atop the board. Zeke Mayo, guy I love, naturally, unexpected.
Not anymore.
He is having a homecoming, not unsurprising, to Lawrence, Kansas, to play for Kansas. Noah Reynolds, a guy that we thought they were maybe kicking the tires on. We haven't seen a list there, but there might be some interest. So he's sort of in a weird, donut hole space where he's not on the board.
Old Miss, if I remember right.
Yeah. Then there's Miles Rice, guy we love, but that's a deep water to swim in. Sebastian Thomas, who was contacted today, and that's it. That's 5.
Right.
5. Oh, JP Pegues, sorry. But JP Pegues is likely off the board. I think he's already got visits announced. So 1 out of 6 right now. No combo guards that are really locked in. You feel like if you're going to have to take 2, that board is going to have to get wider. Much, much wider.
They're just slow playing Miles Rice and slow playing us, and they're just going to slip him in right after the dead period, and
we can dream, right? But
I have no information on that. I'm simply wish casting right now.
Yeah, But that's the thing. Like I think we've talked about it. You want to have respect for guys and say you're clearly our priority. We're not looking at anybody else. Like there is some traditional elements still play out here, even though these are shotgun weddings. Guys want to feel prioritized.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know that they're the guy that you're looking at, and that's fine. But I think, as you go into the dead period where, if they had maybe one other commitment and they, like, say they'd gotten Porter done really quickly and Perkins was looking to stretch, I'd say, okay, that's fine. You filled 2 spots. You clearly now can zero in all your efforts on a big and a point guard. The question, maybe we've talked about, you shouldn't worry about Porter, but I think it's one of those things. It's how efficiently can you work? If you had gotten Porter done before the dead period, now you can begin focusing on expanding the board, to find someone to couple with Tony. Now you're telling Tony, we're going to put you in this tandem and this is how you're going to get used. Your case can get a little bit more nuanced on that front there. And, the big man market, realistically, I don't think it's really jumped as much as we thought it would at this point. That's the one area where I wonder, as we go out of the dead period, are we going to, see some more names come in? We're getting to the point now where the next week or so, the tide is going to crest of guys going in. And there's still some big names on the board that have not come in for the big man market. But Missouri's post offers so far have been Amari Williams. They're out there. He's cut his list. Reed. They maybe backgrounded Frank Mitchell at Canisius, but that was a terrible fit. And then Sam Alexis, who we mentioned at the top, would have been an overpay, and that's it. Then it's Tarris. No Ruben Chinleyu, no Igor Milicic, no, you probably have some other names off the top of your head that they have not contacted. Do you need to start expanding the board there? And how that's where I think you got to get to is, I don't think you need to call 6 people, but calling 3 wouldn't be bad. Would not be bad to give yourself some more options there and really see if you can make it work. Now, maybe they sign 3 guys in 5 days coming out of April 11th and make us look silly, but it feels like they got to do there's some maldistribution on the board right now. And
yeah, I would say, at least with the big men, it's our belief, well-founded belief, that those are their priorities, the 2 local kids. But I think what's more is you look at kind of who they're recruiting, you're not seeing many guys behind them get contacted. Sam Alexis was probably one of the primary ones. Didn't really have a whole lot of interest there. So, it seems like it's not just what we've heard, but what they're doing is prioritizing those 2 guys. So, you're walking a fine line. If you land them, that's great. We saw what happened last year when they did not land their top target, and Caden Shedrick, who chose Texas, and then that spurred a month-long merry-go-round of, I don't know the diplomatic way to say it,
shatter shot.
I kind of thought when Jimmy Bell was lining up a visit to Mizzou that there might be a problem. Nothing against Jimmy Bell, but the fit wasn't there, and he probably profiled more as a backup. But, when you get to that point, you don't want to get to that point. Yeah. So, you want to have your options, and if it means bringing 2 guys in for a visit, great. If you really think you got the one guy you want and you can land him, even better, but you better do it.
This is the point I'll make as we wrap down. Like, I would say I'm not worried right now. Like, I'm looking at it right now. By April 4th, 2023, guess how many of the top 50 recruits had committed?
Last year?
Yeah. Top 50 portal guys.
Probably 5 or less. Hey,
3.
Isn't far off.
By the end of the going out of the dead period, which ended on April 10, we were at about 13. So there'll probably be about 8 or 10 if we're working on the same pace, which we have questions about whether there's some, ice blocking up kind of the sea lanes right now. But if, things go correctly, the stage is set really for the period coming out of the dead period. The next 2 weeks out of there were 25 commitments in the top 50. April 10 to April 25 last year was when we saw a lot of the big names come off the board. And realistically, I think then after that, there were some other names that came out, and committed, but those were guys, again, who had gotten NBA evals. And, after, May 1, there were only about 7 or 8 guys.
Mm-hmm.
So by April 20th or April 20, somewhere in that period, we all keep saying, oh, more guys going to the world. The quality is going to start cresting in the next week or so. And then by the third week of April, a lot of the top 50, which all these guys we're talking about currently, as it stands, are in the top 50, will be off the board. So in about 20 days, they're going to know whether or not this plan worked. And then at that point, I can tell you from at least looking at the big man market last year, you go from quality starters to guys who are solid reserve pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you get to April 25 and you are not locking in your top targets, then you start to get nervous and you start to go, okay, this is not going the way we want it. Right now, you can say, all right, we would love to have something done before the dead period. We want to expand the board. If it gets to April 20 and, we're looking at one guy, then I think people are right to start going, okay, this is not good. It's not good. And I think that's, we try not to, tell people to panic, and we're not telling you to panic now, but that's sort of in my mind. If you get to that third week of April and maybe you don't have Reed, Porter, if you don't have 2 of these guys in, you've prioritized them for what? Going on 3 weeks?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean, I would add to that at least the way that I have them broken down between more traditional big men and more hybrid combo types, the traditional big man market it's thin. I mean, there's just not many guys. I've got 6 guys that are currently in the portal that I could see being a high major player. And I think 2 of them are about to come off the market. One of them Mizzou's not involved with Cliff Omaruri from Rutgers. They're not even marginally in contention there. I think Brandon Huntley Hatfield just cut his list to 4 teams.
North Carolina State's considered the favorite there.
Yeah, so you're down to 4 guys, including Tarris Reed, as far as traditional big postmen. But on the other hand, the combo market, the skilled postman market is quite robust. I've been trying to prioritize guys, and I would say there's probably 15 plus that I'd see right now that could probably be high major players.
My guy Igor's still there. He's still there.
Yep. So, you may not get a big guy as far as if Tarris Reed falls through, a true back to the basket post. And to that, I say that's not the biggest problem if you quickly pivot and look at these guys that have skills that are 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", that can defend a little bit, but can do a lot of the things you want to do offensively. You bring him in and Jevon Porter, you're really not that far behind. You've got Jordan Butler, who you need to progress. All of what we're talking about portal-wise and program building-wise, you need the 3 freshmen or the freshmen that come back to progress into guys who can be significant contributors next year. If you're not doing that long-term, are you really doing anything? You can try and hit it on the portal, but that's hard. Another discussion. But
and I think what we're talking about is, if this is all really wonky, it's you don't worry until you have to.
Right.
I think for us, the question here is not, are they looking at bad players? No, they're looking at good players. Like every indication we've gotten, all of our sort of conversations we've had is, I think they're looking at the right kind of guys for the most part. I think that there's a coherence to some extent as to what they want. The question is, what's the process looking like for efficiently vetting guys, for efficiently determining when guys need to be prioritized versus when do you need to expand, versus when maybe, you need to kind of cut your losses. We don't know, because we don't sit in, we're not agents, we're not, communicating on that front. We're not in the, staff meetings where they're saying, I got this fine. Like, there's always an information void that I think we have to be conscious of. But I think we're aware enough of kind of what's happening at a pretty good macro level to say that, there could be some ways that I think you could, shift this process to be a little bit more efficient for them. At the end of the day, though, what matters are the results.
Yep.
If we get to May 1 and they've got these 3 guys in the boat, we will have just looked like we were wringing our hands over nothing and playing tiny violin. Like, it doesn't matter. But I think as we sit here right now, going into a protracted period where they cannot go out and they cannot have people come in, what can they get done to set themselves up to push for those 2 weeks coming out? Because April 3rd, anxiety shouldn't be high. Starting April 11th, that push begins. Every day that goes by, I think it starts to ratchet up a little bit. And so I think folks should just be prepared for that. Before we get out of here, is there anything I haven't brought up? Anything you feel like we need to discuss as we enter week 3 of portal season?
Well, let me look at the old board here real quick and just make sure we've discussed everyone. Yeah, I don't think we missed anyone. So, or at least anyone to talk about as a matter of urgency.
Awesome.
We could talk about players all day. I mean, that's what we do. So.
Yes, that is what we do. So a little bit of kind of homework, a little bit of kind of like housekeeping. We'll be back next Wednesday. It'll be April 10. I imagine that podcast will be pretty brief, considering we'll be in the midst of a dead period, barring, someone deciding that they just want to end this whole, courtship process and commit. I think you and Sam will be back doing for that. I will be out for the next couple of weeks. Next week I have an obligation, and then after that I am going abroad for a vacation. So it will be you and Sam potentially having to grapple with the fallout if these initial recruitments don't work well. Next, I'll say this. We are keeping kind of a running conversation going on Rock M Plus. On the basketball board, we have an entire, 300 response page thread now. That's kind of a catch-all spot for where we're putting in guys who are entering the portal. I'm, as time goes on, trying to reasonably keep up with that pace and put out mini scouts on guys. Basically go through and look at their, top play type data, look at their top plays, kind of maybe watch a little bit of film and kind of just put in 250 words along with a table so you can see, back of the envelope kind of what these guys look like. Watkins, as guys go in, he is putting together guys in spread in his, sort of sheet and form and sort of vetting them out. So we have those kinds of insights as they run. I think we need to clarify too how we sort of do things. If guys are prioritized like a Tony Perkins, I will, go through and do kind of a deeper portal target profile on them. Those are up right now for Jevon Porter, for Tarris Reed, and Tony Perkins. I think over the weekend you put up kind of a separate thread on Tony once we got confirmation that he was visiting. So we're trying to basically keep everything in one spot, even if it's a weird mishmash. And then as we, begin to see guys get isolated or prioritized, we kind of split them away. We hope you join us. It's really, really fun. It's great to sort of have a live, ongoing, living, breathing organism of a thread where this stuff sort of exists. I think it's a good spot for you all to ask us questions, for us to be able to engage really quickly. So we hope you are joining us with that. We hope you look at RockM Plus. RockM.plus is the website. Come join us. We really, really would love to have you there. We think it's a fun place to really sort of have, just like I said, a running dialogue about this stuff. And, for you guys to ask us questions, push back on what we're seeing, things of that nature. Over on the main site, we have a live running sort of portal tracker thread where we're putting in basic, brief, everyday updates on guys who are contacted, guys who are visited. You can see the list of guys there. Every week I sort of go in and I try and clean all that up and do weekly summarizations. So that's what we're doing right now. If you want to see live, living, breathing stuff and entirely too granular scouts, join us on RockM Plus. If you are still unsure, but you want to keep tabs on everything, we have you covered at the main site. Make sure you're also reading the main site. We have a bunch of people doing spring sports stuff there that are really, really passionate about it. They're doing a great job for softball, baseball, any number of activities over there. If you are not subscribed to this, please do so. You can subscribe to our YouTube feed. We would appreciate it. You can also subscribe to our podcast and get them on your favorite mobile device and listen to us yammer about all manner of Missouri portal strategy. Watkins, did I miss anything? Did I hit everything? Am I I'm coughing. That's how hard I'm going here to sell this for everybody.
I think that basically covers it. We also have a roster tracker over on the main site as well that I put together that tracks the current roster and whether they're staying or going, but really nothing's going on that front. So it's kind of fallen off the landscape, but there's a few nuggets in there. We found out a few weeks ago that a few guys were going to be leaving, so that got updated. That's where the information was put. So, that's something to keep on your radar too, but that's more of a reactive piece.
Yep. All right, folks. With that, we are going to get out of here right at an hour. We appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you reading. We appreciate you interacting. My Twitter handle is down there. I am at MattJHarris85. Watkins' Twitter handle is Data Mizzou. Follow us. We'll have short stuff there as well. We sometimes chime in on that thread. We have all the streams, all the platforms covered. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be back next week with more portal updates. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and the benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not the Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.